one as well as live streaming. I think Todd made me the host so that I could do that. The recording actually failed. The local recording failed, so it was a good thing that the YouTube stream worked. Yeah, and it was my hard drive was filled up. I don't know why it would be filled up from recordings of.
You don't know? Come on.
So in any event,
700 hours of recordings this month.
That's right. So I deleted a bunch of, who needs all those kid movies on the, it's
baby's first steps or board members' incessant commentary.
Exactly. I remember pretty clearly when they were born. It's fine. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. Call to order this special meeting with the Joint Easton Reading Region 9 Policy Committee. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our July 31st, 2020 board meeting. Do I have?
So moved.
Thank you. And
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously passed. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is public comment. Okay. Our next item is board member comment.
Welcome, Jen, to your first Friday morning meeting of the Policy Pals.
We're now the Policy Pals. That's a new name for us. That's a new name for this week.
That's good.
We spend this much time together.
Thanks for including me as a pal.
Awesome. All right. Very good. Moving on to discussion and possible action, starting with the resuming the review of the CABE policy manual. And I think we may want to do this a little bit in the sort of opposite order, but yeah. So we had two items that we had moved into first or had in as first reading in the last meeting of the tribe boards. And I think the intent is that we review those in sort of more detail. And I doubt that we'll get far beyond reviewing those items.
Yep. I think as a practical matter, those two items I assume would go to second reading in the normal September board cycle, probably.
Right.
I don't think we're expecting another tri-board to cover that. I
Right.
think we're a little tri-boarded out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think there's a pretty significant interest in people starting to get into their, specifics of how their schools are going to do that stuff. So, all right. So when we look at the, so just to be consistent with the agenda, I think we can jump into the CABE policy manual topic, but I think we jump into it for about 3 seconds right now to say.
And if we can,
there's work
we can
to be
jump
done.
into it to orient Jen a little bit to the process too.
Yeah. So let me share my screen. And let's do. Okay. So we have a regular process that we've established for this, what we've called the policy reboot process. So we have this sort of Frankenstein collection of policies that are very difficult to navigate for our administrators and for our board members and for the public. And so we sort of formed this joint policy committee for the purposes of streamlining those policies. Instead of trying to work off of the Frankenstein of existing policies, we started with the sort of 1,000 series of CABE policies and have been working through with a set of core principles. We have a process for the sort of full series review, sort of going from the 1,000 to the 2,000 and 3,000. We also have needed to establish how do we allow a policy to cut the line, especially recently with various sort of policies that are related to the pandemic, Title IX, et cetera, where we need to sort of move them to the front of the line and do that. So we've kind of been stuck for the last several weekly meetings in this policy updates that need to cut the line process. But overall, the process is when we have new policies, whether it's, we imagine ourselves a year from now in mature state and we have a new policy that comes down in the 2000 series, we will add it to this document. This will be where we say, regular updates to policy will go here. And we'll simply use this as a way of saying, we know we're going to need to talk about this. So for now, because we have these face mask policies or emergency disaster preparedness or distance learning, et cetera, we're putting them here and making them our core focus. So we took two policies. I'm sorry, I'm just going to go back to our agenda. We took two policies for first reading in our last meeting. So 6172.61, the distance learning plan, and the Title IX policy, the 4000.1 and 5145.44. I think our intent is to try to work through these, and I think, we will see how far we can get. We generally take about an hour in this meeting so that it's reasonable and we can get back to the rest of our respective work days. But I think we can dive in unless there's any questions or comments or concerns. We can start, we can jump into item B on the agenda.
I would just suggest, John, if you can share your folder on Google Drive with Jen, that might be helpful for her to see where the comments are and things.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. DESMARAIS. Thank you.
Oui, merci.
Merci beaucoup. All right. That is my extent of French.
Foreign Language Committee is at 10.
Okay. All right. So let's jump in order. Distance learning plan 617261. And here we have been doing this in Google Docs, and the overall process is pretty simple. We take the content from CABE, we put it into a Google document, and we ask that committee members go through and mark it up. So the policy committee members will go through and insert comments. And then in the course of these discussions, we review those comments. The expectation is that everyone has already read all the policies, and we're here to talk about the places where any one of us says, hold on a second, we have an issue there. We just, as a sort of matter of sort of operations, we're intending to cross-reference policies so that it's easy to navigate. I'm going to scroll and scroll.
And this is the part of the meeting where somebody asked John to increase the size of the font.
I was just going to say that.
I already did with the chat function, by the way.
It's a fixture of this meeting that I jump in and I say, I can see it fine because I'm a foot away from a massive screen.
We should put it in the agenda.
We should. All right. So we have a comment from July 17th, which was, I think, the first time we reviewed this. The tone here in general direction and delegation seems appropriate. Any comments or questions?
The point of that comment, I think, was to relate back to the previous 11 bullets that took a different tone.
Right.
And that this is the tone we want to necessarily strike with the policy generally, which is, that we're delegating to administration within certain guardrails, not that we're dictating specificity.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So
the only thing I'm going to question on this is with respect to grading. Grading can be anything from putting a sticker on a child's paper to a high stakes assessment. And if it says that subject to approval by superintendent and Board of Education, that might be difficult. Right? So can we make this a little bit more, sort of to qualify the type of grade? And I'm looking to Jen here as well, because this probably applies often at the secondary level.
Yeah, I'm thinking the reference is to a report card grade, right?
yeah, I think that's right.
Formal grading.
I think that's right. So do we want to say any changes to the formal grading and reporting systems?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that works.
Does formal grading and reporting system necessarily mean report card, or does that introduce new ambiguities?
I think it still is a bit ambiguous because it could be the percentage weight given within a course to
Mhm.
test whatever, which.
I'm wondering if instead of trying to confine grading and reporting systems, we instead say that changes to the grading and reporting system shall be developed by the administration, subject to approval of the superintendent and reported to the Board of Education.
I think that's right. I don't feel as though we have been
we do not.
approving anything today. Why would we change it for this?
And I don't want to give the suggestion to members of our boards that they need to be involved or
Right.
think that they should be involved in discrete questions of grading that are really a core administrative and teaching function.
Right.
Agreed.
So if we add and to be reviewed, what is the
Reported to,
Reported.
because we're
Subject to
talking
the
about
approval of the
changes to the
superintendent
normal. This is to reflect changes to the normal course. So the board should be apprised that there are changes to the normal course.
Yeah.
And that is going to, in itself, give the administration a little bit of pause into what it is they're bringing to the board because they know it has to be reported. I think
Yep.
that strikes a balance.
Yep.
Right. So this would refer specifically during these times to pass fail,
Right.
trimester versus quarters versus the semester breaks, that kind of thing.
It's
Right.
here's what we're doing differently with respect to grading because we're in distance learning. And I
Right.
think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to expect to be reported.
Right. Okay. Good. Resolving.
Do you want to take formal back out or do you want to leave formal in there even if it's ambiguous?
I would leave it in.
You
I'd
don't-
leave it in.
Yeah, you don't have to report if you're changing. We're using star stickers instead of happy face stickers.
We're using digital stickers and Bitmojis instead of physical
That's right.
stickers. As a,
Actually, I do want to know that. Never mind. Okay. All right.
Great detail.
Okay. Scrolling. Is that it? No way.
No.
What are we missing here? I mean, I think that was the end of our comments. I'm scrolling to the top again. I think that's it. We had skinny this down significantly.
We must have been pretty tired if we stopped short of the just one paragraph.
I think we were running out of time. I think it was literally we needed to end at 10:15 and it was 10:14 and 30 seconds.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
we were all bumping up against another commitment 2 weeks
Right.
ago.
That's right. Okay. Anything else to consider here?
I have not received any feedback from my board on this policy specifically. I don't know if anybody else has to kind of report back since the
No.
first reading or otherwise.
I've not.
Do we want to adopt or recommend this subject to that change? Or if we're talking about the September board cycle, do we want to hold off unless there is for either the 21st or 28th to do that in case there's any additional feedback?
I think that's fine.
I'd be happy to just adopt it right now. And if there's feedback, we can reopen.
Yeah. Okay.
I think adopting it is the better way to go. Move it
Cool.
along. I don't think you're going to get intense feedback on this. I think that the chances are slim to none.
And if
I
I
would be
do, it'll
surprised.
be at 7 o'clock the night of the meeting of the second reading, not the time to relate back to now.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay.
So I move that the Joint Policy Committee recommend the policy as amended to all three boards to be accepted for a second reading.
Second.
Thank you, Gwen. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the vote. All in favor? Unanimously passed. We'll move it to second reading. Excellent. All right. And I'm just going to make a comment here.
And John, can you note with green text or however else the change that was made so that we can advise the board with respect to how it's different from the first reading?
I can.
And this policy number, John, I can't see it here. I could just refer back to the agenda.
It's in the heading 6172.61.
6172.
Okay. Good. And just for transparency on the process, we are also naming the version. So, it's easy for us to track sort of where we sent things. So we're just going to name this version moving to second reading. Okay.
Do you want to put the date in the version too? Or I
It's
guess it tags
automatically in the,
Yeah.
in the version history, it's
Yep.
automatic there. Okay. Very good. That takes us to our Title 9, which is not listed here, and it's a shame. Okay. All right, bear with me one moment. The search function is somewhat wanting. All right. We're missing this document. I'm going to share my screen again, just unpause the share, or sorry. Good. You can see here, right here are all the policies. We had it in here before, so I'm wondering where it went. Let me just check for the original source documents. Okay. We have it as a part of the agenda.
Did we only open it out of what Sharon had sent 2
No,
weeks ago?
no, we had already looked at this, and we had started looking at this. So let's go. I'm going to try a search here and see if that will get us where we need to go. Good. Good. Okay. Now the question is, do we see any comments here? I don't see any comments. Has anyone put in comments yet?
I don't recall that there were
Okay.
any
Okay.
comments. I think we got to this and there was a level of
Yeah.
exhaustion.
Yeah, that sounds right. Okay. All right, good. So we'll review in detail, and we can do our comments now, and we can use the rest of our time to go through. So that I think we're actually in fine shape here. All right. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So I did a review. I have this sort of policy highlight document from CABE that specifies that the Title IX regulations require policy change, which of course we already know, but
Right.
there are many, I mean, this is an entirely new policy. The regulations over 2,000 pages in length. So there are a lot of changes here. So it looks like our current policy is fairly detailed, and we may need to be fairly detailed again, but with all of the new language. It's a new definition of hostile environment. There are new roles involved. There's a different response plan. The complaint process is different.
At the risk of sounding like I'm punting, is this the sort of thing that makes sense for us to say, here is our current policy outside counsel. How can we conform this to current expectations, as opposed to trying to do surgery on the CABE proposed versus the existing one without necessarily knowing why some of the things were put in the existing one?
Sure. I mean, this is,
I'm happy to drill and do the work. I just don't want to sort of step on landmines that we might not see.
We know what's driving this. I mean, is this a very large, thorny political issue?
It's changed to Title IX regs, is my understanding.
Yes,
That-
the change in the law as implemented by the
Yes,
Justice Department.
I think
So
that's
if
right.
there's a new person elected to president,
Correct.
this could change fairly quickly.
And
Is
it's
this the
like,
kind of thing where you would want to say we're adopting, standards consistent with current law? The new regulations as promulgated can be found here and
Yeah.
we will comply? Or is this the kind of thing where we really need to get those regs out there so we know that we comply?
Right. That's a great question. We comply with the law. Our Title IX officer or officers are Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Yeah.
For questions, call one of them, and because to Jen's point, the extent to which this is a fluid legal landscape, we will be changing this policy constantly if
Right.
it's just to keep up with what the way the Justice Department is interpreting Title IX.
yeah. So is it our position that we send this to outside counsel for review, or that we do what something more like what Maureen is suggesting?
Or both. Do what Maureen is
Yeah.
suggesting and ask outside counsel if there's any reason not to do that.
Yeah.
And ask
yeah.
outside counsel what the highlights and lowlights are of this in terms of your present compliance duties. Because you clearly will have present compliance duties. If it's 2,000 pages of regulations,
Yeah.
just distilling that, figure out what your present compliance duties is quite a task, I would imagine.
I'm also sensitive to sort of understanding in detail where new policy might say you no longer have to do this versus you are required not to do this, because I think that these new changes are essentially relaxing some of these regulations. I'm wondering whether or not the relaxing of that is required, or if we have some optionality to keep a more restrictive sense
Right.
of this, if we believe that it better serves our students and
Right.
community.
A valid point.
Can we impose a heightened standard or
Exactly.
no, basically?
Right.
And to the extent that our guiding principles, generally speaking, are to keep it simple, stupid with respect to required law,
Right.
ought we to be creating a heightened standard
Right.
as against legal framework?
Yes,
Right.
I mean, that's a valid point.
Yep. Okay. So
And just so that our heightened standard doesn't put us in a difficult position to civil rights law in protecting the accused and stepping on the accused rights, because I think
it's
yes, outside counsel will be
right.
Does anyone have a digest or a summary or a, compendium of what these regs were supposed to do? We don't even have that understanding.
I would be shocked if somebody at Shipman didn't have that already prepared.
Right. Somebody's white paper is done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have this for the policy highlights. I have the key provisions, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 13 bullet points of the key highlights of what's in the regulations.
Okay. So the next step, generally speaking, I think our point of view on sort of all the policies is we're complying with federal and state law. If we sort of, what is the appropriate sort of process for getting this to Shipman and asking the question? We haven't had a joint policy committee prior where we would ask that question at a joint policy committee. It's been
I was
something.
going to say, yeah, what's been done in the past, but I'm happy to share it with Rich Mills and just say we had a meeting about this and we request your guidance.
That would be excellent.
Okay.
And he could look at the videotape if he wants to know what our questions are.
Right.
I mean, for these purposes, I think even while that's ongoing, we can say that the policy is we will comply with all state and federal law. And we could, if we really need to adopt something in compliance with that law, just adopt that and then revisit it. I guess
Right,
that's my other question. Do we need to adopt something to comply with this law now
Can we
while this
can we
review is
direct
pending?
Can we direct Sharon or anybody to take the existing Title IX policy that is on all of our websites and basically put a stamp at the top that says, policy is subject to review, all updated guidance from, state and federal authorities supersedes anything in this policy.
Yeah,
That would be helpful.
it feels like that's
Just
a
so it's clear
watermark.
that the existing policy is dead effectively. And we are complying with law as the law currently exists.
Okay, so Chris, can you just, I'm taking notes here. So policy subject to review and,
I'm going to insert that.
Speaks very quickly.
Okay.
And is superseded by any and all existing state and federal guidance on this topic.
State and federal.
Yes, guidance, regulation, whatever. It being the intent of the boards to comply with their legal obligations.
I think it's August 15th is the date when we needed to have this in place. Oh, sorry, August 14th.
Okay.
All right, so then that makes it all the more important to get that statement up there.
Yeah. It
Well,
being the intent of the boards to comply.
Unless litigation.
With legal obligations.
Unless litigation against the U.S. Department of Education is successful in stopping the regulations from going into effect, these extremely prescriptive regulations must be implemented by districts beginning August 14 of this year in time for the new school year.
So they are already subject to challenge then, Stephanie.
Yes.
All right, so I mean, that's our out too, hey, well, the status of this law was uncertain.
Policy subject to review and is superseded by any and all. I mean, do we need to say something about as long as it's not
I think what you
overturned
said is fine.
in court?
I think that's fine too.
Right. I think the likelihood that anybody is going to look at this is slim, but to the extent they do, having that there is going to be helpful.
Yep. I think about a sort of standard watermark that we put on all of our policies to say, hey, by the way, if this isn't right, we're doing whatever's right.
I mean, not for nothing, to the extent we're talking about this preface to the whole policy book,
Right.
Having a general disclaimer like that isn't a bad idea.
Right.
It basically says, the board's endeavor to maintain an up-to-date policy book that complies with state and federal law. Of course, to the extent that any policy becomes unenforceable because of change in state and federal law, the state and federal law supersedes the policy.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
Did you get
I'll
that?
go ahead
Tom?
and type that out and incorporate it.
Just go back to the video.
We can play it at half speed.
What is our obligation in informing the public of their rights under the new regulations?
Right, so it is supposed to be in all of our handbooks for this year.
All the regulations?
No,
The 2,000 pages.
we have to, I mean, we're required to inform people that we are in compliance. So, I mean, I think you could make the same sort of statement in the handbooks. I want to say most of the handbooks have already been finalized or are close to being finalized. So Jen, it might be worthwhile to check with some of the others to see how they've handled that.
And I think we just left it general with a reference to the policy number.
Okay,
Because
I
the
think it might
goal
be-
of law is the same, and that we're following the law, and here's the policy.
In light of this sort of prescriptive expectation that is being imposed on all districts for the start of the year, might it make sense to have a link or a short statement somewhere on the central office website that basically is, Title IX policy, and explaining that, we're following all the regulations. We understand the regulations to be challenged. We're following the law basically, so that it's a something you can point back to if somebody complains that the handbook isn't specific enough. I don't know.
Sure, I mean, we could say the same kind of wording that you want to insert at the top of the policy, that
Yeah.
it's subject to review and superseded by all, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I am curious how other boards have been handling this summer, and I might ask the
Yep.
CABE chair list the extent to which they've had any opportunity to focus on this.
Right. We'll just add another thing to the list.
Yeah. If this was the only thing to do, it would have been quite a task.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, I will say that this is a policy that is used.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yes.
we need to conduct investigations in discrimination allegations every year.
Are you
So-
implying that a lot of our policies aren't used, Stephanie?
No, never.
So did you guys know you were signing up for a full-time job when you ran for the board event? I just wanted, thank you all.
I did suggest to John and Todd that before we appointed the superintendent, that we take a vote on tripling the board stipend, just to get the community excited. That's
See how much hate mail we get. You can't triple your stipend. Hold on. 0 times 3 equals 0.
The cumulative number of board hours this summer have been
More, I mean,
Yeah.
more than the regular school year. Usually that's
absolutely.
yeah, more than regular
Way
school year.
more.
Probably the last 3 school years combined. It's been insane.
Well, the
an
budget process
exhausting
alone, the
summer
fact that the
overall.
budget process got drawn out for so
Right.
many additional months.
Right. But the good news is we all like each other. So
And that really does help.
it does.
It
And if we don't
You-
like each other, we can't hit each other right now. So it's,
It's depends on where your screen is, who you're hitting. All right. All right. We do have more time. Do we want to reverse back to trying to make some progress through the 3000s, or do we want to call it a day? And I think
we should see if we can do a little bit of work in the 3000s just to kind of get the rust off.
yeah, I think that's a great idea, and especially I think our intent, and I'm just looking for it there, is our 3000 series. I think our original intent was to try to get this done before our next superintendent joined us. I don't think we realized that we were going to be so effective at bringing in the superintendent. Unfortunately, we're not likely to be done with this, and I look forward to having Rydell's participation in this process going forward. So I have a 7:14 stop, which sounds right.
Yep, and I did
found-
not do more work after that point.
I found that comment showed up on my screen after every single page.
Oh, is that right?
Really?
Oh,
yeah,
you,
Maureen stopped here. 7:14 showed up every page on the whole document when I was looking at it last night.
you added that comment to a header or footer.
Probably. All right, well, resolve it.
Yes, resolved, and we'll find the next instance. Here we go. So yesterday, it looks like Chris made a comment. All right. Where are we? Supplemental appropriations.
Right. Appropriations technically come from the town meeting. They don't come from the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance approves that it goes to a town meeting, unless it's within their limited discretion.
Is
in the
that
capital as a non-recurring expense?
is that a different process for any other towns?
Probably, because other towns have legislative bodies that are not town meeting.
Okay. All right.
I mean, technically, the request is first made to the Board of Finance, but this implies that the Board of Finance has unilateral authority.
Right. What's the right way to resolve it?
I would say from the
Region.
you could say fiscal and legislative authorities. 'Cause I think that provides cover for Region 9 also a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. And just a note for you, Jennifer, because I'm typing, you're not allowed to criticize my typing. So you can criticize, but then you have to take over the typing.
I so appreciate your typing.
All right. Fiscal year shall, okay, good. And if people did not go past this section, then we need to start reviewing in detail. And I need to reorient myself to just remember how far I went.
I did the first about 90 pages last night of this document.
Yes, and you were emailing about them at 1 a.m.
I was adding comments, and as I was adding comments, I was like,
Comments
you know,
automatic.
Maureen's gonna get an email from this, and it's gonna be weird, but whatever. Here's the comment.
I know, because I was awake. I had to deal with something at 4 a.m. for someone in a different time zone. And I'm seeing those emails coming in and I'm like,
Yep. And so this is add to, what do we call that? The enumerated duties.
EDI or EID or OID or something.
That's what it was. It was the OID. OID. Okay, good. So we have a document that we're preparing that will collect every place in every policy that says the superintendent or designee will do this. Let's make sure that we have a record of that. So good.
So we can create the world's most intimidating job description.
I was
right.
going to say, I hope you didn't share that with Rydell.
Well, and a part of it is to say, you know, the places where we have that and it's not actually required by law, we need to make a decision about our priorities as opposed to just saying, oh, and you have to do this and you have to do this. Like, let's look at a list of the compiled responsibilities so that we can have an informed conversation about
And
what's
frankly, as we look at this from a what are the obligations of a central office administration,
Right.
we see what the scale of those are and have a
Right.
different conversation about resource allocation than maybe we're having right now.
exactly.
And then in the cases where it's ×3.
That's right.
Right. Mhm.
That's right. Yep. Okay. Good.
This was just copied, that one was copied straight from the statute, basically,
Right.
which I didn't love, but it was like, whatever.
Right. No, I mean, there's not harm.
No,
Okay, here we go. From back in February.
this one.
Yep.
Did Tom finish his homework? I don't think he did.
No. And
I do.
we already copied this one to OID. Okay. 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 Okay, so I think we've definitely gone through these pieces, but we have questions pending. So we also have, Jennifer, you're getting the entire tour of everything that we do. We also have an open questions document. So somewhere in this ridiculous collection of tabs, we have a document where we're taking any question that comes up and copying it into that. So these are sitting there. And I think essentially we're going to be looking for Rydell to dive into that document at some point, and we'll have to prioritize that process. Okay. All right. I think
Do we want to address that policy now, or are we, or has that all been punted?
I think
Because if you scroll up, we had stopped here on 724, 731.
to return here. Yep.
Return here. So I don't know if we intended to start talking about 3240 right now, or if
Right.
it's such a mess at the moment it's being passed for the next round.
I'm sorry, I missed the question in that.
Or are we trying to resolve all these comments now, or are we saying that what we talked about in February? Because I'm not sure we talked about it in February so much as we all commented on it in February.
Yeah, I think that's
thought that
right.
some of this was reserved for Tom, no?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was the question about, does this mean program for non-resident high school students, or do we, like, a lot of these questions, they were questions that we had for Tom.
Okay.
Yep. This is my favorite kind of comment. This whole paragraph is terrible. Okay.
The later at night I do this, the more aggressive I get in my criticism.
So Maureen's comment here.
Yeah, that could be resolved. It's not
Yeah.
saying that actually. For out-of-state students attending the program, I think we were still looking for input from Tom as to whether that happens, though, were we?
Yeah. I think that's probably right.
Can you
So-
repeat that, Maureen? I just got distracted by someone who came to the door.
Yeah, I get distracted by my dog all the time. I think we were looking for input from Tom as to whether or not we actually do pay and anything. The board shall establish a tuition rate for out-of-state students attending the vocational agricultural
We
program.
don't
Do
have a vocational agricultural program.
No, students have the option of participating in the Trumbull.
Right.
But we
Trumbull
don't
sets the
exchange
rate.
funds for that purpose.
No.
All right. So I think we could probably delete that sentence then, no matter what.
Yeah, because this is optional language for a district operating a VOAG program. We don't operate a
Right.
VOAG.
Okay. Here, goodbye. Thank you. Very good. But on this one, our bad paragraph, I think we're still looking for guidance.
Yeah, I think this comes back to, we've got to have a view as to how we're reconciling current differences in how this is calculated and how we work with staff and grant, tuition reciprocity across districts for staff that are in one of the districts and things like that.
Do you need to provide such specific information about how special education situations are handled when that's really covered under special education law? I mean,
I
it
think
seems
this
to me
is-
that the tuition setup is based on the agreement with parents in a PPT.
Well, this is if we're tuitioning kids in. So if you live out of district, but you come in and we let you be here,
Mhm.
we're going to charge you the cost of the program in addition, which I guess theoretically would be charged back to the other LEA, but that's a whole different conversation.
Right. And yes. And that's certainly something that we run into from time to time.
Okay. Right. Principal or head of school needs to go into our definition, our terms at the beginning of the documents. Yep. Yes. I think we can actually resolve this
Yes.
because
Yeah.
we've clearly captured that already. I think we were saying this should be removed because this may be illegal.
Yeah.
It's illegal.
Yeah. So I guess
You
if
probably can have it.
okay. This is being very squirrely right now. There we go. Good. Obligation of super, which goes and it wasn't the OID. OID is the open issues document. It's yeah.
Enumerated duties, ED something.
Yeah.
EDD, enumerated duties document. I
EDD.
don't know.
I think that's right. Okay. Scroll. Talking about handing off
Sale of equipment. So if Region 9 wants to sell computers, should Easton and Reading have right of first refusal to acquire them from Region 9? I would think so.
We
That's
don't
not,
typically do that.
That's not what's done, is it?
No.
I don't
it's not
believe
what's
so.
done.
no.
Right,
I mean, we just got rid of a bunch of stuff.
Right. We just.
right, but do we want to make it the policy that we'll give the towns an opportunity to purchase the equipment first or not purchase?
No, that seems like a huge pain in the neck. I mean, already they've got to, get approval to recycle a bunch of, 12-year-olds MacBooks.
Yeah, and
You know?
frankly, when we're getting ready
What
to get rid of something, it's because it can't be updated or it crashes. I mean, we're not getting rid of things that that we want to pawn off on one of the other 5 schools.
Right, and this is also talking about the town. I mean,
Yeah.
you want
Right.
to set up a whole thing where before we can even recycle anything, we have to notify the first selectman and stuff. And
Creates a lot more work.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to strike this paragraph?
Or
think so.
policy? Do we want to strike the entire policy?
So sales and disposal of obsolete books, equipment, and supplies.
Now it's limited to those with a value of $2,000 or more. So an old Chromebook wouldn't be subject to this policy anyway.
But a group of old Chromebooks would be,
Right.
because its items are a group of items.
Yeah, 10 of them.
I'm not sure 10 old Chromebooks are worth $2,000 either.
No, but what we just got rid of was $2,000 of recycling of all the MacBook Airs that were 12 years old. And
I mean, you could adopt the policy and make it $20,000.
Right. I mean, I can imagine this policy being there for someone who says, you know, the schools are just, you know, sort of throwing things out. They're just wastefully, you know, chucking things into the dumpster that clearly have value, and the town could use that.
Right. The old cafeteria tables, somebody would buy that. The old desks, somebody would buy that. Why are we just dumping them?
Right. And I'm sympathetic to that point of view, but I also don't think that we need additional bureaucracy, you know, sort of burdening our administrators, so that they can sort of, and I suspect that this is happening mostly not just when you're needing to get rid of 10-year-old MacBooks, but when you're getting new laptops in and there's work to be done to sort of set up those and distribute them and train people on them.
Books, textbooks. I mean, this is the typical, I mean, maybe you want to raise that threshold. From
Or maybe you want to delete from procedures for disposal down and keep the top, which would say upon approval of the superintendent's items which have useful life may be disposed, or the superintendent of schools shall have discretion to determine which items have no or limited monetary value.
Right. Because if you take just the first paragraph, you're saying that over the threshold, the board needs to approve it. Under the threshold, or when there's no value, the superintendent has discretion.
Right.
And I think that's probably fine.
Yeah. And especially if the threshold is low, then we're saying a part of the jobs of the superintendent is to run eBay. Right. For like, stop. Like that's not what we're doing. We have
Right.
more important things that we need you to focus on. And
Frankly, if the threshold is low, it creates a perverse incentive, which is to get rid of things in smaller chunks as opposed to in larger chunks, just to avoid the bureaucratic nonsense that goes along with the policy. And I don't want to create weird incentives like that if it can be avoided.
Right. Also, we're saying all transfers to town agencies shall be at no cost to the receiving agency in this detail here below.
I think you want to delete that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we're saying we're going to
Mine
keep
is not interested in that.
just,
Superintendent is not going to be running their own buy nothing.
right. Free, what is it? Free cycle. You could just, I think we'll change the policy that you can just put it out on the curb, and if somebody picks it up, then you're all set.
It must be
good.
accompanied by a spray painted sign with letters at least 12 inches tall that say free.
That violates our town ordinance related to signs. For,
Not if
What
it's
if it
on
says
private
vote for
property.
free?
You can have a private property sign that is not, offensive. You want to, $20,000 seems a fair number to me. I think we're good.
And then you got to change it in the third line too.
Yep.
And that should probably say items or groups of items there, because otherwise it's actually different.
Right.
I think when we send this all back to CABE, John, we should request that they waive our membership fees on a tri-board basis for about 10 years.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's right. We've had 2 attorneys, administrators, and then typists attend.
I have to say it's the most efficient meeting I've been attending recently.
We are
so
very
thank you.
efficient. It's Friday morning. You had better be, Jen.
Yeah, things to do. All right, forms, generally, we do not include
No
forms.
forms.
Especially not for this policy.
Yep. Just need to check that delete happened well. Okay, good.
Yep.
Cross-reference with existing policy is when we want to take stock policy on.
I think each board has a slightly different existing policy on this.
Right. And it's about the approval over a certain dollar amount, right?
I think it's the approval and the process is all different. I think each board in the past 4 or 5 years has grapple with this
Yes.
uniquely.
Yeah.
I do think it makes sense to try to unify those in some way, but I think
agree.
that's kind of a side project that
Yeah.
somebody has to undertake and bring back.
If we looked at the most restrictive, would that be unacceptable to the other boards? I think becomes the question, right?
Right. What is the most restrictive, and can everybody live
Right.
with the most restrictive?
Right. Okay. All right. So we're going to come back to that. That's still unresolved.
Yep.
Forms.
Form can go though.
Hello, form. Goodbye, form. There we go. Okay. Duty. Grant applications after approval.
I mean, that's not what we typically do. I mean, as just a regular course of operations, I oversee title grants 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then our special ed directors handle the special ed grants. And there's the Perkins grant. I mean, that's a lot of reporting.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of this language? Is it I mean, so the board being up to speed with the various sources of funding, that's useful. But is there a better mechanism for us to ensure that that's happening?
You know, given the districts that we are, this is not a huge source of funding. So the grant that gets the most attention is the special ed grant.
Mm-hmm.
I think the point of this is that the financial statutes that govern budgets have all kinds of carve-outs about the extent to which grants from third parties and government sources create offsets to the town's financial obligations, and how high or low budgets can go and taxing authorities can go, and where towns can take or leave money, and what gets counted or not counted. And so this is requiring that all of those funds be adequately reported publicly so that the financial and education authorities that are elected can assess what the grants are and make appropriate calculations with respect to the budgeting. But to Stephanie's point, it's such a small drop in the bucket that it kind of becomes irrelevant in our application. But that doesn't mean that there's not some kind of legal basis for it. It's just a matter of figuring out how we can ensure that there is appropriate access to that information without creating a bureaucratic mess.
So Scott's regular report includes transfers and the offset when we receive the grant. So is that an adequate amount of public notification?
I mean, I think if we said that plus perhaps, I mean,
the
the
budget
budget process includes it too. I'm sorry?
Is it possibly a yearly summary just to include the amount of, many of the grants are 2-year grants. We could create a summary of all of the grants.
Right. On the year-end fiscal close conversation, it's we spent $20 million. The state kicked in $8. We took from the tax base $19,999,992. The entire allocation was another $500,000. That's unspent and is not being requested for the towns goes back. It could be called out like that. The other sort of piece of this is when you get beyond sort of the title grants, to the extent, for example, that we had, teachers or groups of teachers that apply for a grant from the XYZ Foundation, and they provide us funding to buy furniture or curriculum material or pilot something. This suggests to me that that would all be part of that, reporting, and we can only accept it after there's a board approval. And I don't think we want to get down that path.
No, it's going to be, yes, that would be hard to contain, because then so there's the Weller grant, and then, but there are people who will, so then do you include, the local education foundations, is
Right.
then considered a grant?
Right.
And that
If
gets,
the PTA gives teacher grants, they have to be, I want to make the third-party grant process as frictionless as possible, and be open to as many sources of revenue as is legal. So to the extent we can do that and be sufficiently transparent about it, that's great. Which kind of gets back to, do we want to just create a reporting requirement as opposed to an approval requirement, and
Mhm.
say any, grants will be reported on an annual basis or whatever it is, and let's pick the month that makes the most sense to say, where have we received grants?
May I suggest state and federal grants?
Is it reasonable to expect a sort of comprehensive set of,
Right.
it would be useful. Frankly, I would love to be able to say to the community in general, state, federal grants, and oh, by the way, the PTA gave you $26,000 for these things, and ELF gave you $50,000 for these 5 things.
I agree.
Yeah.
One of the recurring great, parking lot complaints that people have is, well, there are all these wonderful grant programs in the world. Why aren't we writing grants to acquire all of this money?
Right.
And so to the extent we can highlight where that already exists and, frankly, point to people, if they want to be volunteer grant writers, we can have a conversation about how you can become a volunteer grant writer.
Yeah.
That, or you've got to figure out what the cost of having a grant writer on staff is and whether or not they're going to more than make up
Right. Pay for
their own
themselves.
cost.
Right.
Very hard to actually get money from the grants in our kinds of districts.
Right. Right.
The grant money, the CARES Act is a perfect example of this.
Yep.
The latest release of money at the state level, Scott and I had to fill out an extensive survey with a lot of detail, and we probably won't see $1.
I think going to any needs-based or government grant is most of the time a process of frustration. That doesn't mean that there aren't third-party independent private foundations that are looking for districts to maybe pilot things or collaborate, and wouldn't hold it against us that we're otherwise well-funded.
Sure.
Right. Any organization says, I really wish we had more engineering or robotics, instruction. And so here we will give you $50,000 if you go buy a bunch of these Lego Mindstorm kits and, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
I also think it's important to be transparent that some programs that are initiated are funded by grants. And then if
Right.
the budget doesn't roll over and support it, they'll go away. So
Yes.
we need to make
Right.
that.
Like the PTA is providing seed money to get a 3D printing program off the ground, but you've got to ultimately support it in the budget or it goes away.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
A lot of the grants have the supplement, not supplant wording as well. So
That's right.
we might get something going, but then it moves to the operating budget in the next year.
Are we comfortable with the language that we've sort of replaced here?
Yes.
Good, simple, and we'll see the how happy we are with this is the way that we comply with that.
I just want to look at the previous paragraph quickly. After the annual budget is set, the town raises from local property taxes such
That's
funds.
factual. You could delete that. That's what happens. It's not a
Right.
policy.
That's what I'm wondering, like why we're sort of recounting. The superintendent should make an application for all grants, which is entitled to all federal grants directly by the school board. Yeah. Okay.
We have to. And
Yeah.
it's not a choice, frankly. It's if I don't submit a title grant on time, I get a nasty email. So we are compliant with the expectation that we submit the title.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, we're over time. Are we comfortable stopping here? I feel like we are getting the rust off, and we are actually getting into back to the work that we were trying to do.
Yep.
So yay.
Back to fun Fridays.
Yeah. Stopping here, 8:14. Okay.
So for next week, the only agenda item is continuing this, I think.
Yeah. As long as we don't have any
That's
other
fine.
policies jumping the line.
Yeah, I'll send the note to Rich Mills and see what he says about Title IX.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to our agenda.
I think the only thing we would change is into the event that it made sense for Rich to join us and have a conversation about it, we could add it back to the agenda, but
Right.
that's,
Right.
And we'd also want to be careful about privilege and all other stuff. That's a different
Right.
conversation.
Yeah, not on a meeting that's on YouTube, folks.
Right. I did add a 2-day reminder. I usually don't have 2-day reminders, but just so that we all get a reminder and go, oh, right, we have the policy committee. So we can add anything to the agenda prior to the requirement for notice. Okay. Public comment? Committee member comment? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very
Could I
good.
ask John and Stephanie to stay on for a minute after we adjourn?
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Care, folks. See you later.
See you in a couple hours.